It is such an honor and a privilege and a blessing to be here. As we celebrate Dr. King today, would you imagine with me, if you would, being in that Birmingham jail, arrested yet again for standing up for what you know to be right, what you know to be righteous, to be carrying the burden at this point in his life, to know that he's got a wife and kids at home, and he's having to spend the night in jail for fulfilling the assignment and the calling that's on his life. Now, if you would, imagine that you get a piece of mail. Now, you really kind of got to go back, because we don't even have an appreciation for what it is to get a letter in the mail. We get emails and they get on our nerves, and we get text messages and threads, and that becomes all consuming. But imagine being cut off with all communication, and all of a sudden you get a correspondence. Someone has something to say to you. And he opens this letter and he recognizes that these are fellow clergymen, not just fellow clergymen, but these are white clergymen who have taken the time to write him a letter while he finds himself sitting in jail, absent from his family, heavy with the burden of the call that's on his life. As he opens the envelope, unfolds the paper, and begins to read, imagine his disappointment. While optimism might have been there, I doubt it. He quickly realizes this is not a letter of encouragement. It's not a letter of admonishment. This is a letter of cease and desist. You're in here paying a high sacrifice while you sit in prison. It's for nothing. They write this letter, and the cliff notes is, Dr. King, I see what you're trying to do. Now ain't the time. Now ain't the time. Brother, find another way. And I think the most devastating thing about this letter is that it was an encouragement to find another way in Jesus' name. Find another way in Jesus' name. I remember talking to a journalist not too long ago. Well, it was about a year. Actually, these COVID years have got it knocked all down. It's probably about 2 or 3 years ago now. It was right when, I'll tell you when it was. It was right when the Colin Kaepernick controversy was brewing and everyone was talking about it. If you don't know, Colin Kaepernick was I believe he was a quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. And it was in the height of a lot of social injustice, particularly concerning police brutality with Black men. And he said he wanted to protest the national anthem to bring recognition to his burden, to his challenge, to his plight. He started off initially just by sitting on the bench. Then some veterans talked to him and said, hey, that feels disrespectful to the sacrifices that we made. So then he asked them, what better way? He said, and then they admonished him, instead of sitting in a sign of disrespect, kneel in a sign of respect, but also protest. So taking the cue from the veteran, he would kneel. I remember talking to this journalist one day, and the issue came up of Colin Kaepernick. And he said, you know, I agree with what Colin is trying to do. I get his point. It's just a terrible way to protest. It's just it's just not a good idea. And I just thought, and today, all day, we've celebrated Dr. King, and we've quoted him and put memes up. And if you go on social media threads and feeds, you'll see even some of folks that may even surprise you that they even acknowledge Dr. King, but they're celebrating his dream. But I wonder if they were there in 1966 and 67, would they agree with his protests? Or would they sound like these leaders and this journalist that are basically saying, find another way to protest? We talk a lot about what happened in the Birmingham jail, but can I just take my last 3-4 minutes? You know, Tommy don't give a brother long to talk. Can I just take my last 3 or 4 minutes and talk about the room in which they wrote the letter? We talk about the prison in which it was received, but can we talk about the room when they wrote it, the room where it happened, and what was missing from that room? What was missing from that room and what was missing, what then in turn was missing from that letter, was something that I experience all too often, and it is the lack of empathy that often shows up from my white siblings that don't know the intricals of the burden of racism in this country. Oftentimes with good intent, my white siblings will show up in moments of racial crisis in our country and in our society, expecting and looking for logic, looking for evidence, looking for proof. What they don't realize most times is they're looking for me to prove my tears. They're looking for me to give weight to my tears. My tears alone are not worthy of empathy. I need evidence. What was missing from the letter, and oftentimes what we can miss as we seek to live out this king dream. And when I'm talking about the lowercase, talking about this king that comes from a kingdom who is Jesus Christ, that's where Dr. King got the dream from. Often what's missing from the letter and what's missing from our interactions is a deep sense of godly empathy. The ability to sit with Dr. King in the burden and the crisis that he was carrying. The ability to sit with minorities as they navigate racial injustice and dynamics and struggles. The ability just to sit, not solve, not try to fix, not look for evidence, not show me receipts, not prove your tears. This is not a moment for me to have to prove my tears. This is a moment for me to sit in the brokenness of the reality of the world. And what I want from my Christian siblings is not an admonishment to try to find another way to protest that makes them more comfortable. I need empathy. I need someone to sit in the brokenness with me. You know what was missing from that letter and what was missing from the room where it happened when that letter was written? Any sense of empathy. Second, sacrifice. See, a part of us loving one another well means that your comfort may have to be disrupted for you to show up for me well. In that moment, the man that's carrying the biggest burden, the man that's in a prison cell, the man that's without his wife, the man whose life is being threatened, they, as they sat in comfort, are asking him to make yet another sacrifice for us. Delay, wait, now's not the time. Sacrifice your desire for equality because you're just making our lives hard. You're making our work difficult. You're making it harder for us and our white congregations and our white spaces. It's too much. It's too much. As if us talking about it and protesting it causes it to happen. No, it's happening. And we've already made sacrifices. Can you make some and be uncomfortable enough to stand alongside with us? In order for us to honor Dr. King's legacy, our work has got to be marked with empathy. Our work has got to be marked with sacrifice. And the sacrifice that day needed to come from the room where the letter was happening. They needed to make the sacrifice of their comfort, of their privilege to come alongside this burden. So today, as we celebrate, are you walking in empathy? And are you looking for opportunities to sacrifice and disrupt your comfort so that justice may not be allowed to live in your community, in your area, or in your sphere of influence? Thirdly, that we're missing empathy, sacrifice, and a love. A love that flows from the cross of Calvary. A love of redemption and a love of righteousness, a love of rightness. A love that not just says, let me give you a hug. A love says, I will not allow injustice to go on my watch. That's the love of Jesus Christ. The reason why Jesus left his comfortable seat in glory, empathy, put on flesh and dwelt among us, got on the cross and sacrificed. He said, because there's something wrong and it has to be right. And if I'm going to say, I love you, I've got to be willing to show it. Love looks like sacrifice. Love ain't love. No, God is love. And as we seek to love one another, our love should be marked by godliness. So if they loved Dr. King in that room, they should have made every effort to get him out of that prison. They should have showed up with bail money instead of bait money. They showed up with bait to try to get him to switch the agenda. They should have showed up with bail money. They should have showed up willing to sacrifice. They should have showed up with some Nikes and some Adidas so that they can put shoes on and march and walk with him. They should have showed up with love, because love says I sacrifice. Love says I stand in empathy. And love says I don't ask you to wait for what's right. Love says I stand alongside you and I demand what's right. We've got a great opportunity. We can write new letters. We can create new narratives. We can live in the dream. If you're showing up with your opinion and your frustration and your political alliances and your Republican perspective or your Democratic perspective, if you show up with elephants, donkeys, and your own rights, and you're going to miss the whole opportunity. I think the saddest thing is history provided those white clergymen an opportunity and they missed it. Well, friends, here we are again. And history has provided us yet once again an opportunity to write a new story, a new narrative, a new letter for the next generation. May this letter, may our story, may our narrative be marked by empathy, sacrifice, and love, because how we love really matters. Thank you.